Snow, steel, silence, then the thunder of 10,000 hooves. In the frozen winter of 1240, 100 men made 10,000 of history's most feared warriors turn and flee. Not with superior weapons, not with reinforcements, but with something the Mongol Empire had never encountered before: Vikings who refused to die. Picture this: 100 exhausted warriors standing against 10,000 fresh Mongol cavalry. These weren't just any soldiers, these were the last free warriors of Rus standing between the Mongol horde and the complete annihilation of an ancient culture. The odds? 100 to 1. The chance of survival? 0. By the end of this video, you'll understand how terrain, psychology, and sheer Nordic stubbornness created one of history's most impossible military victories. You'll discover why the Mongols' greatest strength became their fatal weakness. You'll learn the forgotten Viking battle technique that neutralized 10,000 horse archers, and you'll see how a frozen river changed the course of an empire. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. The Mongols erased this battle from their records. Why would the most successful military force in history want to forget a single skirmish? What made these Vikings different from every other army the Mongols had crushed from China to Poland? How did word of this battle spread fear through the entire Golden Horde? Their commander, known only in whispers as Bjorn the Unbreakable, orchestrated what military historians call the impossible. How could infantry withstand the arrows that had devastated civilizations across 2 continents? How could 100 men psychologically break thousands of veterans who had never known defeat? To understand how 100 men stopped an empire, we must first understand the terror that was sweeping across the known world. Because what happened in that nameless valley between frozen forests wasn't just a battle. It was the moment when mathematics bowed to mythology, when the unstoppable force of the Mongol Empire met something even more powerful: men who had already accepted death. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of history's most decisive battles, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic war content. Ring the notification bell to never miss these incredible tales of courage against impossible odds. Now, let me take you back to that frozen valley where empires collided. By 1240, the Mongol Empire had consumed civilizations like a plague. From the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, no force had withstood their revolutionary warfare. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years fell in days. Armies that numbered in the hundreds of thousands simply ceased to exist. This wasn't conquest, this was apocalypse on horseback. Consider Kiev, the jewel of Ruses. Population before the Mongols, 50,000 souls. After 3 days of Mongol attention, fewer than 2,000 traumatized survivors. The Mongols didn't just defeat armies, they erased civilizations. Their strategy was brutally simple: surrender and live as slaves, or resist and watch everything you've ever known turn to ash and bone. The secret to Mongol dominance? Speed, range, and psychological warfare. Each warrior commanded 3 to 5 horses, allowing them to cover impossible distances without rest. Their composite bows could punch through armor at 350 yards farther than most enemies could even see clearly. But their greatest weapon was fear. They cultivated terror like a gardener tends roses. Pyramids of skulls marked their path. Refugees spread stories of unstoppable demons who drank blood and ate the hearts of brave men. But here's where it gets insane. In the northern forests of Rus, something survived that the Mongols hadn't calculated for the Varangians, the last echo of the Viking Age. These weren't the raiders of old who terrorized European coasts. These were their descendants, hardened by centuries of warfare, carrying the fighting traditions of men who believed death in battle was the highest honor. The Varangians were anachronisms, warriors from a dying age facing the military revolution of the future. While the Mongols had perfected mobile warfare, the Varangians still fought in shield walls, still believed in the old gods, still carried the massive 2-handed axes that had once split Saxon shields and Frankish helms. Military logic said they should have been swept away, like autumn leaves before a hurricane. The strategic situation was desperate. The Mongol forces under Batu Khan had already crushed Volga Bulgaria, annihilated the Rus principalities one by one, and were pushing toward Novgorod. The Volga corridor, the ancient trade route that connected the Baltic to the Caspian, was their next target. Control it, and the last free lands of the north would fall like dominoes. The Mongols had assigned this task to a force of 10,000 riders under Noyan Chagatai, a commander who had earned his reputation in the furnace of the Chinese campaigns. His men were veterans who had reduced the fortress cities of Persia to rubble who had made the proud knights of Poland and Hungary flee in terror. They moved through the winter forests like wolves, seeking the last pockets of resistance to crush before the spring campaigns. What they found instead was 100 men who had made a decision that would echo through centuries. In a nameless valley between Murom's endless forests and the frozen marshes of the Kama River, the last free warriors of the north had chosen their ground. They knew they couldn't run, there was nowhere left to go. They knew they couldn't hide, the Mongols would find them eventually. So they did the one thing the Mongols never expected. They planted their feet, raised their shields, and waited. 100 men against the empire that had conquered half the known world. But in a nameless valley between Murom's forests and the Kama marshes, something unprecedented was about to happen. Something that would prove even empires could bleed. Dawn broke grey and bitter over the Valley of Destiny. 10,000 riders under Noyan Chagatai moved through the forest paths like a bronze serpent, their approach heralded by the jingling of 10,000 bridles and the drumbeat thunder of 40,000 hooves. These were veterans of 20 conquered cities, men who had watched Baghdad burn, who had turned the knights of Legnica into corpses decorating a battlefield. Each warrior was a master of the composite bow, that miraculous weapon of horn and sinew that could drive an arrow through chainmail at distances that seemed impossible to European minds. 160 pounds of draw weight, capable of loosing 8 arrows per minute with deadly accuracy. The Mongol order of battle was perfection itself. Light cavalry scouts ranged ahead like hunting hounds. Behind them, the main force moved in disciplined units of 10, 100, and 1,000. Each man carried 2 bows and 3 quivers of 40 arrows each. Silk armor worn under leather protected them from their enemies' weapons while weighing almost nothing. Most importantly, each warrior led 3 to 5 spare horses, ensuring fresh mounts for pursuit or flight. They were the ultimate military machine of the 13th century. Against this tide of military evolution stood 100 men who might have stepped from the sagas of old. The Varangian 100 weren't regular infantry. They were the elite guard tradition passed down from the men who had once protected Byzantine emperors and carved their names on the Hagia Sophia. Each man stood over 6 feet tall, in an age when the average height was 5.5 feet. Their mail hauberks weighed 50 pounds each, hand-forged rings riveted in the old style that had protected their fathers and grandfathers before them. But what truly set them apart were their weapons. Pattern-welded axes that had been passed down through generations, their steel folded and refolded until the blades held edges that could split a silk scarf dropped upon them. Round shields of northern oak, bound with iron and painted with symbols that hadn't been seen on battlefields for a century. And in the hands of their best warriors, the terrifying Dane axes 6 feet of ashwood, topped with crescents of steel that could cleave through horse and rider alike. What happened next would haunt Mongol nightmares for generations. The Varangians had chosen their ground with the cunning of men who knew they were going to die, but intended to make death expensive. The valley they selected was a geographical trap, barely 200 yards wide, bordered on both sides by dense forest that would break up any cavalry charge. Behind them, the frozen Kama River cut off retreat, but also prevented encirclement. In front, the ground sloped gently upward, forcing any attacker to charge uphill through a narrowing funnel. Their commander, Bjorn the Unbreakable, was a legend even among these legendary warriors. 60 winters had turned his beard white as fresh snow, but his arms still swung an axe that younger men could barely lift. He had fought at the Battle of the Kalka River 17 years before, one of the few survivors who had seen Mongol tactics firsthand and lived to learn from them. Now he positioned his 100 men with the precision of a master chess player, arranging his final gambit. The psychological warfare began before the first arrow flew. The Mongols announced their presence with their traditional terror tactics, drums that thundered like the heartbeat of a giant, war cries in a dozen languages from conquered nations, the ritualistic display of horsetail standards that had presided over the destruction of empires. It was theatre designed to break enemy morale before battle was even joined. Then something happened that nobody expected. The Varangians responded with nothing. Complete, absolute silence. 100 men standing like carved runestones, their breath misting in the frozen air, the only sign they lived at all. No war cries, no drum beats, no movement except the slow, steady rise and fall of their chests. It was unnerving in its simplicity. The Mongols had conquered half the world, and every enemy had met them with noise threats, prayers, desperate battle cries. But these Northmen stood in silence that seemed to swallow sound itself. As dawn broke on February 17th, 1240. Two military philosophies were about